growing up under the constant threat of Russia taking away our freedom, made us aware of what was at stake. The reason I think why I engage in social media activism is that I don't have another option. It's the best thing that I know how to do. When we saw the first missiles fly towards our cities, we immediately knew that we had no other choice but to do what we could to fight back and to make sure this was the last time that Russia was going to take our freedom and our country's future. So my name is Valeria and I'm from Kyiv, Ukraine originally. I've been in the UK since I was a teenager, so I've spent more than 16 years here working and studying and living, and I am basically a activist and a campaigner, but I also have a background in social media and using social media to mobilize people for change. The reason I think why I engage in social media activism is that I don't have another option. It's the best thing that I know how to do. It's my background. I'm using the skills that I've acquired over my life to help my own country. I have friends who are fighting on the front line. This is the least that I can do. So when the full-scale invasion started, I was back at home in London. I will forever remember that specific night and the time and how it all unfolded. I was woken up by my parents basically loudly talking on the phone. As soon as I heard my dad's voice on the phone with friends and family, I ran downstairs and my dad already had the television on, and I started seeing these images, which to me seemed like something out of a movie, which was missiles flying towards the city that I was born in. And I just didn't understand at that point what specifically I could do. But the first question I had was, how am I able to somehow explain to the world that what is happening is essentially something that was going to happen because Russia was always going to try and take Ukraine, which it has tried to do for many, many years, many centuries actually. And so first thing I did was open my phone, open my Twitter account, and I just started posting. And I remember it was like 4 a.m., 5 a.m. I don't remember the specific time, but it was early hours of the morning. I was texting my friends. I was posting tweets on Twitter, and a lot of my content, a lot of the tweets that I was posting, it wasn't content. It was just things that were on my mind. I remember the first thing I said was, you know, Ukraine is a country that has its own history, that has its own people, that has its own everything. It is actually Russia trying to take away Ukraine's freedom. And a lot of my posts started gaining a lot of traction with thousands of retweets. And as the time went on, 5 a.m., 6 a.m., 7 a.m., more and more people woke up and started seeing what was happening. And so for me, you know, social media became my way to connect with what was happening back at home, but also my way to help somehow spread awareness about what was happening in Ukraine, because the only thing we had back then as Ukrainians who were abroad was our stories and our knowledge. And that is what I decided to take and do with my time. One of the first posts that I did that went viral was about my grandmother, who actually lived through years of Soviet Union, years of repression under the Soviet Union. But she also experienced World War II, where her parents fought against Nazi Germany with the Russians. But now she was experiencing war again, this time from Russia. And the tweet received over 20,000 retweets. And this really showed me that what I had to do to fight back against Russian propaganda was just share my story, share the story of my family, share what to me was obvious, but to others may have been less obvious or may have been completely unknown. And so the best way to fight Russian propaganda is to trust and listen to the voices of Ukrainians who are sharing what they have experienced and lived through, and to not forget that these are real people with real experiences that need to be heard. One of the most complicated things to process is when I see harmful narratives around Ukraine being elevated by people with a lot of large followings. When they go and repeat narratives that we've seen and heard in Russian propaganda, that we've seen and heard from Putin and others around him, it's really upsetting, because other people who might be just listening to this content without actually analyzing where it comes from, they might actually believe these influencers. Because for me, someone who has grown up with harmful narratives that Russia has been trying to spread about Ukraine, but also about everything else, I can identify Russian propaganda quite quickly. I know when I hear it. And for me, Russian propaganda narratives are actually really uncreative. They repeat, it's the same things that get repeated over and over and over again. And what makes me angry is when I hear these narratives come up again and again and again, sometimes from people that I know just when I am talking to them at a coffee shop, sometimes from people on the internet that are just commenting on the latest news and events, sometimes from politicians, sometimes from influencers. And to me, I think we've had not just the 3 years of the full-scale invasion, but the 10 years of Russia's war against Ukraine to learn how Russia spreads some of its lies about Ukraine in the world, in Ukraine as well, but in the world. And to me, the fact that we're still at a point in which these narratives get repeated, these lies get repeated, is really frustrating. For me, what also makes me angry is that it was only this year that Meta banned Russia Today, the main propaganda channel that Russia uses to spread its narratives, from the platform, when we've actually seen its consequences, the consequences of the propaganda that Russia Today spreads, not just for 10 years, but for many years since its existence. It shouldn't have come as a surprise to us that this propaganda and disinformation was going to also impact societies outside of Ukraine, outside of Russia. We've seen it have consequences in a lot of different countries in a lot of different ways, because what we need to remember when we talk about Russian propaganda is that at its heart, its goal is to destabilize societies, because destabilized societies can be used by Russia to its benefit. So one of the most powerful, if I may say so, campaigns that I've done in the past 3 years was when we were reaching 2 years of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, with a group of other campaigners, British campaigners and Ukrainian campaigners. We decided that what we had to do was to get people to keep supporting Ukraine was actually bring something physical, an actual artifact of Russia's actions in Ukraine, which for us at that point, we thought that it would be extremely powerful to bring an ambulance that was bombed by Russia, that was attacked by Russia in Ukraine. And so we found an ambulance that was attacked by Russia in Kharkiv, but it was attacked and it was shot at, and we brought it to the UK and we toured it across 5 different cities in the UK because we wanted to get people to come and see it, to understand that what Ukrainians have been saying about Russia's illegal actions, and it's illegal to actually target medical facilities and medics in general and ambulances. We wanted people to see that what we were saying wasn't just stories, but it was actually the truth. And the juxtaposition of a bombed out ambulance on the streets of the UK. So we went to London, Edinburgh, and other cities across the UK. That juxtaposition really made people see how real war was. One of the big motivating forces for me was this need to also not just keep funding and helping people in Ukraine, but also is this need to also cut Russia's ability to wage war in Ukraine. This is also why we brought the ambulance to London and other cities, because we wanted to show what the bullets and the missiles and the tanks and all of these things were actually doing to ordinary people, ordinary civilians, medics, and others, because we really think that there's so much more that countries and governments across the world can do to actually make sure that Russia's supply of funding is cut and they are not able to sponsor their war machine to keep waging this war of terror on the people of Ukraine. For me, something that drives me forward in terms of no matter how it impacts me is hope. Because for me, hope is not just about positivity and happy, clappy butterflies and things like that. It's the hope that we can change something. And it's the hope that we as individuals are able to take an action that can change whatever is happening at that point in time to help others, to help people, to help, in this instance, my own country. So it's just about, yes, acknowledging that social media can impact us, and not just social media and the narratives that we hear, but it's also that a need to always have this hope within us that can guide us and keep us engaged in this common fight to help Ukraine and fight harmful narratives that are being spread. Russia's full-scale invasion has highlighted to millions of Ukrainians what country we want to live in. Yes, sometimes there are problems within our country, but what we are also seeing as our future is the ability to make our country better. We're seeing our future as the ability of ordinary Ukrainians to contribute to making Ukraine a place where everyone is respected and where empathy guides whatever we do as a state, as people, as a society. And for us, being under Russian occupation would mean that that would simply be impossible, because Russia rules by fear, control, torture, persecution. And for us, that is not an option, because we want to live in a state that allows us to contribute towards making that state better. And that is the Ukraine that we see as our future.